if you even have the thought of an excuse as a sales leader, as a seller, as a marketer, you're already dead in my books. In a sea of sameness, I'm more and more convinced that whatever product or service you sell, at the end of the day, they are really buying you. Your job is to provide value to that network in any way you can. Thought leadership, being helpful outside of your role, data, benchmarks, whatever you can do, even if you're early in your career, you can find ways to be valuable.
Yesterday we had Brent, Adamson, Scott, and Scott. Should we do Scott B, Scott A? And we're
going to need to, yes.
He's like, tell us a story. Dude, did you ever hear the maggots on the plane story with him?
I've never heard that, no.
So years ago, there was an Atlanta flight. Wait. Yeah, it's on Google, as Sam's found it, where basically the flight got grounded because there was maggots infesting the entire plane, like falling from the overhead bins. And they had video of it, and there's Brent in the back. It was like, okay, well, that's not a good one, but it was a funny story, so we took it. But anyway, yeah. So,
and what was the source of the maggots?
So they found out later that someone had left their food in there. It was, who knows what kind of food, and the maggots took over and then infested the flight. So,
wow. All right.
Yeah, I was like, when you clean the plane after, you should probably take the food. I mean, there's other things, but who knows? To me, that's a best practice. But
from ABM to PLG, from medic to medpic, the world of business is constantly evolving. We'll cover the who, what, where, when, why, and most importantly, how you get the transaction. I'm Matt Adamson, and he's Craig Rosenberg. Let's get started.
So this is a fun so you're in Vancouver, right, Scott B?
That's correct, yeah.
One of the greatest cities. It's actually, would you say it's an underrated city? What do you think of that?
I would say it's underrated, for sure. Yeah, it's. I'm always surprised how few people have actually been here. When I talk about it's always on people's list, but people don't make it up here too often.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then Sun Valley. So for the listeners, Matt and I had talked for a while about having Scott be a co-host. So we have two Scotts today, no Matt. Today's hosts are me, obviously, and then Scott Albro, who we'll call Scott A from here on out. And Scott and I have done multiple businesses together. He's been a guest on the show and is now a advisor to early stage companies across a lot of different things that they're trying to do, whether they're building their business, whether they're trying to get their founder brand out, and probably eventually going to come back to me with another amazing idea of a company he wants to start. But if there's anybody that we should talk go to market with, it's Scott A. And then Scott B is Scott Barker. Dude, you've been around for a long time, by the way, and in terms of being out there and a guy that we should listen to. And then, seriously, man, like I was like, first of all, by the way, when people have advisor stuff on their LinkedIn, it's impossible to get to their experience. I'm like looking through them going, holy crap, dude, this dude's doing a lot of stuff. And then I remember all the things you would do back in the day at Outreach as well. That, by the way, is a long run if you look at the timing there. And now I get to listen to you and see you on Go to Market Now, and you're still doing work with Max with the Go to Market Fund, and you are a B2B thought leader. Your show is great, very actionable, like incredibly actionable, which Scott, when we did TOPO, used to yell at me all the time for actionability. Even like an email I would write, he'd be like, is that actionable? And so like, I could tell he would want to be on the show as you come on with all the actionable things you see. So dude, I really appreciate you spending the time to come on with us with me and Scott A. So I appreciate it.
Pumped to be here. And yeah, thanks for the kind words. It's been a fun journey. I feel very, very fortunate. And this next chapter at GTMfund has just been a ton of fun. I can't believe it's been 4 years since we started the fund. And all the media stuff we do is super creative it's all a flywheel, and it's super fun. And the guests make it easy. I just hang out and ask some questions. And luckily, they're all way smarter than I am, so it's great.
Yeah. Well, I got you two guys on, so I'm going to queue up the questions and you know, probably be a fly on the wall too. And my guests today will help make my life easier. But so we have our big question that we asked, which I'll get to in a sec, Scott B. The first one, though, is what we like to call the Matt Adamson feature enhancement for the transaction 2.1, which is before we go with the big thing, and tell us. We just want to hear a story and an amazing go-to-market story. We started this with Brent threw us for a loop with Maggots on a plane, but this is a free-flowing show. If you have something that could top Maggots on the plane, bring it. But it could be heroic, it could be funny, whatever that might be. Like, you hear so many stories. We'd love to hear one before we get going.
Maggots on the plane is going to be tough to beat, tough to beat. I'll share a funny one. And it's still go to market. So, I have to be a little careful with what I talk about in terms of fundraising, but, GTMfund, we're a venture fund. So of course, part of that is fundraising. Fundraising, I've come to understand is maybe the purest form of sales. And one of our largest investors now in the fund, a big institution. I don't think I can say their name quite yet, but I got introduced to through one of our founders, and they were nice enough to fly out. They flew to Vancouver, and we ended up having lunch. And I like pickles. When I eat a sandwich, I want a pickle. And so I ordered pickles for the table. They forgot our pickles, and I was kind of choked. And so I kind of made a big deal of it with the server to make sure we got our pickles. They ended up bringing a big plate of pickles. It was kind of like a whole thing. Anyway, this meeting goes, quite well. And I end up sending kind of a recap email to the team with like next steps. I'm like, okay, here's what we got to do. Here's where the relationship's at. And I think the title said something along the lines of X company, next steps, and one lonely pickle. It was just kind of fucking around. And then I can't remember what transpired, but I think it was one of my other partners just decided to forward that email to what we'll call the prospect at this huge institutional fund of funds. And because the email itself was like, it was a fine email. It was like, here are the next steps. And they're like, I'll let you share those next steps. But I'd forgot that in the title there was and one lonely pickle. And so this very serious financial institution that ended up turning into multiple $1 million started with a pretty funny one lonely pickle was the subject line. So we joke about that a lot. So you can make great. Funny mistakes, and humor and things sometimes actually work to your advantage. So humanizing yourself is okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Hey, that you have to nail the subject line. I mean, that's just good copywriting, right?
I was going to say.
Nobody opens the email without a good subject line. So, and Craig, you and I actually have a related story, and we can't name names on this one either. But Craig and I once worked with a CEO who's actually a very well-known CEO, and he used to have this trick. When he would be introduced to someone, and if the person had a name that was, a little bit hard to pronounce or associate with the spelling of the name, he would spell it out phonetically, like sound it out. So he'd spell the person's name correctly, and then in parentheses next to it, he'd do like the phonetic spelling of it. I think that's what it's called, the phonetic spelling of the name. This person's name ended up being a pretty disturbing swear word. And so he had this in this draft email and forgot that it was in there, forgot to change it, and sent this email to this prospect with the phonetically spelled out curse word name. it was totally fine. Like the guy totally understood and forgave him. But like another example of like email copywriting gone wrong.
I love
I've
that.
thought about that where like, is the outbound and or customer engagement strategy to purposely completely F up your email to them? You know, like I had this one play, Scott B, you're nodding your head. I'm going to give you this one, then let you go, which is, you know, a lot of times you're going back and forth, let's say after a meeting, and like, you know, you like, so they send, like, so Scott's the CEO. Let's say Scott did the meeting with the sales rep, and sales rep's like, how'd you think that go? And he writes, that dude's smart as shit. Like, I cannot believe it. Then you accidentally forward that to the prospect that you're talking to. I'm like, that's a brilliant play. It looks like it's a mistake, but actually it's like a great way to compliment them, which you could not write, by the way, in an email to them directly, like purposeful, right. But you might as well. Anyway, I write that down, everyone. Scott B, you're nodding your head. What do you got?
No. I love it. And I think where we fall down is like, so that play is great to use like once or twice a year, but you can't just like take that and everyone's now going to be like, that's a fucking great idea. Let's go do that. And we're going to do that to like everyone. And like, as soon as it gets out there and it feels disingenuous, then you're harming yourself. So like, it's about in a sea of sameness. I'm more and more convinced that whatever product or service you sell, at the end of the day, they are really buying you, and you have to show that you're an exceptional person. And usually exceptional people are dynamic. They have a sense of humor, can be sarcasm, can be whatever. And like, so tailored to that specific prospect, like, yeah, like have some fun with it. People want to do business with people that are actually human beings. And if you can tie that into showing that you're incredibly capable and also a good time, you know, that's what you want.
Yeah, love it. All right, so here's the big question. We'll start the show and then we'll go from there, which is, so what's something that the market thinks is right or doing right? Could be approach, methodology, et cetera, or it could be multiple, right? Most people do, you know, 1 to 3, and they're actually wrong. And what is it and what should they be doing differently? All right, I'm going to set you up and then I'm going to lay back and hear what you have to say.
Do you want me to kick off or Scott A, do you want to go?
Oh, sorry, Scott B. No, Scott B. And then
okay,
Scott A's probably got a long list too. So we'll have to see how this show goes. But he's a host, man. He's got to
okay, cool.
dig into.
Cool. All right. So I have many. I'll try and keep it to 2. The first right now, what I'm seeing is the market over complicating pipeline generation and closing new business. I think we all overcomplicate what that means and how to do that. And I'll give some examples a little bit later on. And this comes from someone who is a go-to-market tech and process nerd. I have been selling since I was 18 in one form or another, golf spa packages door to door, a one-call close environment where I'm making 150 dials a day. I've been a BDR in software. I've been an IC in software. I've built out teams. I've built out sales development teams, sales teams. I've been like a one-stop shop for like a VP of sales, VP of marketing, and VP of CS, where I'd like sell something. And if I needed marketing materials, I would create those. And then I would actually deliver the campaign that we sold. And so I was constantly trying to like over-engineer things. And I think this last stint, raising these last 2 funds has reminded me what it actually is to sell and to build relationships. And I'll get into more examples, but that's number 1, because I think we're overcomplicating everything. Everyone's looking for the next tool that's going to solve their problem. How do we do AI and how do we automate absolutely everything? And I think we've got lost in the sauce a little bit. So that's one that I'll go into. And then number 2 is everyone is woe is me right now, saying that closing revenue is the hardest it's ever been. And excuse my French, but fuck that. It has always been incredibly hard. The ZIRP era was the anomaly, not the norm. You know, you talk to anyone who's walked into a building and tried to sell a Xerox printer. Not easy. You talk to people who were trying to sell stuff before email was a thing. Imagine if you didn't have that form of communication. Not easy. But what we do now have is a built-in excuse because the market is bad and there's an over-proliferation of tech. And so when things get tough, we always have this sort of built-in excuse and you can blame something. And, you know, if you even have the thought of an excuse as a sales leader, as a seller, as a marketer, you're already dead in my books. It requires full and complete accountability. And I think we've got this built-in thing that makes us not have to have that accountability. So those are the two things, and I'm happy to dive deeper into them.
Albro, your reaction?
Well, I just totally agree. I mean, I tend to be a contrarian thinker, and it sounds like what Scott B's talking about is just exercising a little bit of contrarian thought here. I mean, the groupthink out there right now around go-to-market stuff is incredible. Just to piggyback on Scott's first observation, like, boy, if you look at a place like LinkedIn, like all the talk now is about automation, quantity, right? Tools, technology, you know, like what I would call like cheap plays, right? Like tactics that can, quote, scale. And there's very little talk about the human side of sales right now, like less than I've ever seen. There's very little talk about the enterprise, right? That stuff just isn't talked about anymore. It seems like people aren't paying attention to it, or they're just taking it for granted. I think that's a real problem. By the way, if you're going to complain about not being able to close business, you sure as hell better be really good about the human side, on the human side of selling, right? Like that's where you make your money. That's where you close deals. You know, Clay or whatever it is, or La Growth Machine or whatever. I mean, you know, there are all these tools out there now that do not close business for you, right? It's still the human side of selling that closes business for you. So totally agree with Scott's comment.
Yeah. And so I'll paint the picture a little bit. And these are some of just I try not to pontificate on things I learned like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because things move so quickly. So these are just like real things that I'm kind of, call it, remembering or getting reminded of now. And, you know, I think a lot of people see all the stuff we do on GTM now and the podcast and all that. And they're like, oh yeah, Scott's out there like being a marketer and an evangelist. And, you know, the truth is that's like 5% of my time. You know, the vast majority of my time is in a selling function. I just wear a fancier hat and we call it venture capital, but I'm selling. I'm either selling an LP to give us money, or I'm selling a world-class founder who has 14 term sheets, and in a sea of sameness where every VC fund looks the same, why they should take my dollars in this round. So it's always selling. What's interesting in VC land, which has brought up all these reminders, is there are restrictions around fundraising. And we're not like a small fund anymore. I can't put exact dollar amounts, but we're talking, latest one is, you know, many tens of millions of dollars. I have never done that before, but I did know how to sell. So let's go give it a shot. But what you learn is you are not selling a product, which is difficult. Imagine selling, but you're not selling a product. You're selling yourself, you're selling your team, and you're selling a vision, which, regardless of if you have a product or service, I still think you should be selling that way. So that's one. Number two, you actually can't tell the market you're selling when you're fundraising. You're not allowed to market it in any way. There's no marketing, no solicitation. So imagine being in a position where you don't have a marketing function. You literally cannot go outbound. It's illegal to do that. You will get slapped by the SEC. And then that's two. And then the third is, because it's such a long-term game in venture, they are coming on a 10-year journey with you. So talk about building trust. Like, it is the number one thing is being able to build trust in a short period of time. And I think if you do have a product and service, but thought in those ways, that my job is to sell myself, my team, and our vision. Play the thought experiment that you don't rely on marketing, you can't solicit in any way. And then remembering that the job is to build trust in the shortest period of time. I think regardless if you're fundraising or selling any product or service, those are incredibly, incredibly important. And it reminds me of this thought experiment that I used to do. This was back in 2015. I was running a BDR team, and we would always do like kind of an initial discovery call, and then we would pass it over to the AE. And, you know, I used to try and get my team to be like, okay, can we make this 30 minutes? Can you make yourself so knowledgeable about the problem that you are solving for a prospect that they would be comfortable with paying you for that 30 minutes? Forget about product or service. They would pay you 30 minutes because they're going to show up and they're going to learn so much from you that they would be willing to pay you some sort of consulting fee for that 30 minutes. And that's how you should be thinking about this. This is not just qualifying someone so that they can get to the next step. I want them to think you as a valuable person. They want to spend more time with you even after the demo and all of that. They're going to ping you and be like, hey, I had another question over here about something you said. So I think that is the game that we're all in. And I think we over engineered on like, let's build sales skills and let's build all these methodologies and let's make sure we're going through all this like process. But like, what about being an actual expert in the area? Like, become that expert, and magically people will want to talk to you, and you need people to talk to you when you're selling something.
You know, Albro was, I've now figured out it's Barker and Albro. And by the way, you guys could start a law firm with that. No, you throw in Rosenberg in.
Rosenberg.
You're on Wall Street, bro. What do So like at TOPO, so Scott would always build the deck around expertise. And I remember like early, I mean, it was everything the whole time. And early, you know, like we evolved with the sales team. And like, you know, some of the early, you know, one of the reps we had before would be like, well, we have to tell them what we do. How do I tell Scott about it? I'm like, dude, he's converting at like a 95% rate. Like, you got to let him do it. And then by the time we had these like really great experienced reps, they were begging Albro first time to get him on there and do the value add. But there was a couple things we learned at TOPO. Now, we were selling expertise, so it's a little bit different, but maybe not. What you're saying is, like, can we learn from your world in selling to LPs? Can you learn from what we did at TOPO? So we found a couple things. One is we had a, like, almost, I would say the numbers were extreme, that for conversion, the conversion was incredibly high if someone had a meaningful engagement with us and our content. It didn't mean they read it. It meant they went to an event that we put on or saw one of the guys speak or one of the people speak. That converted higher. So they would come in, those people would come in with having already ascribed some value to our expertise. Then the first call, Scott, and what he would train the salespeople to do, I don't know how many slides were in the deck, Scott, but like, yeah, we would say, hey, here's who we are. But then he would have, I think, we would constantly be updating current challenges in the market, right, Scott, that we were handling. And if we knew enough about what they did, he would, you know, I remember I used to have to help give him, you know, extra slides that he would request at like 10 p.m. You know, if they were looking to go to the enterprise, and he'd say, okay, well, here's the story I want to tell them about that. What expertise can we deliver? And it was incredibly effective. So the opposite, if they didn't engage, if they didn't come in understanding anything and didn't engage with our content, it was really hard to get things off the ground. And by content, again, I don't mean that they read a research paper, although that helped. We would always try to get them to something. And when they did that, then we'd come in with that. But then everything we did was fully baked with expertise. that converted. What didn't is if they didn't have that basis, or the sales rep went right in. Even if someone came in and said, hey, I want to get an ABM consulting deal done, if we dove right in, we'd still lose that deal. Right. Because, and that was something, Scott, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that, and I know you won't let me compliment you, but that was your genius. It's very similar to what Scott's talking about here. I mean, it's actually
totally
identical.
I mean, you pointed out, like, it's easier to do at a research and advisory firm than it is at a SaaS business or a technology company. So, but, you know, a couple things to add there. One is, like, if you spent time with it, the salespeople were easy to convert. You had to educate them and tell them there's another way, right? You don't just have to pitch the product, but they actually ended up gravitating towards selling insights or expertise, right? They actually liked it. They got it. It wasn't hard to get them to do it. And one of the things that made it easy for them is, Craig, remember we built that insights library? It was just a Google sheet with a list of, like, hundreds of different insights that we had about the go-to-market function. And we had the insight in, like, just think of it as like column B, and column A was like the trigger. Like, if you hear or see this, share this insight. And there were hundreds of these in this Google sheet. And so salespeople could just, you know, on a discovery call, this is pre-AI. This would actually be cool to do with AI now, right? But it's like, you hear this, when you ask this discovery question, great, take them towards this insight and tell this story, right? And that totally worked. The only other thing to bear in mind there, I always thought it was a little bit tricky to then pivot to, oh, and by the way, here's what we sell. Like, we're not just here to share expertise with you. Like, we do want to make money from you. That was always a little bit tricky, and there are different ways to pivot into that conversation. But yeah, that totally worked for us. And Scott, it sounds like that was something that worked for you.
Yeah. I mean, everything, I think my point is that if I'm a software company, I would sell how TOPO sold. And by the way, I have a SaaS product, you lead with that education. And, you guys, grew up in this area. I was fortunate that at the beginning of my career, I learned from folks that grew up in what I call like the age of true digital transformation. So whether it was the mobile trend or the cloud trend, when you were going into organizations, and the leaders I learned from, they were going and they were not pitching some like incremental gain. Hey, we're going to get you this like 4% efficiency gain over here. And, there's going to be some time saved over here. Those little incremental gains. Sure, you can trust some rep who just knows about their product with that. But if you are pitching someone on the idea of, hey, we are going to completely digitally transform your business, and we are going to take you in the cloud, and it's going to touch every single part of your business, well, you have to be a different breed of seller to be trusted to do that. They have to see you as an exceptional person that is smarter than them, at least in this area, and more capable of them. So I think it just fostered this, like, sales in my eyes was more of a respected profession, because you were actually the person that was like, take my hand, I'm going to lead you into this new era. And what really excites me right now is we're on the precipice of another true, maybe the most important technological shift that we've ever seen. And so the chance to be that again, and we can't have the sellers thinking the same way that they have over the last 5 to 8 years, because they're not going to build that trust and be that trusted advisor that will usher them into this new era. So we have to up level, I think, all of our sellers in a pretty meaningful way. And I'm excited, because I think it's going to up level our profession again, and people are going to be excited to sell again, and I'll be like, oh, God damn, I got to hit my dials and send my emails. Like, that's not fucking sales. You're an agent of change, let's be agents of change again. And that's really fun. It's also harder, because you have to have a point of view beyond just your company's point of view. Like, what podcast did you listen to? Like, what did you experiment with on ChatGPT? What did you learn about this business? Because, like, your company can't empower you with every enablement material out there. The world's moving too fast. You got to do it yourself.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I call that just being a student of the game, right? And look, some people don't want to be, right? Some people it's just a job, and that's fine.
AI
There's
will
room for
replace
that.
you. That's fine. You got lots of tools for that.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, back to your point about like, hey, I share insights, I share expertise, and then I pivot to this idea of, and by the way, I happen to sell a software product that embodies that, right? I think that's a really important point. Craig, Javier Soltero. I first heard about this concept from Jav is the best product person I know and a damn good founder and CEO as well. He's had multiple like huge outcomes, ran big product orgs and go-to-market orgs at places like Microsoft and Google. And but he once shared this idea. This was like like 2004, 2005 of opinion. He called it opinionated software. And the idea was like our software products, we should build software products that embody the best practices that we actually believe in. And I think it's a really powerful concept that often gets lost, right? And there's some simple examples of this, right? Like Zendesk in the early days, you could not customize Zendesk. They had an opinion on how you opened and closed a support ticket. And that is the way that you did it, right? And hopefully that Zendesk sales org and marketing org for that matter, prior to getting to the product, they were sharing best practices and expertise and insights around how to handle a support ticket, right? And that makes that segue or that pivot into, hey, I need you to buy my product now, that much easier.
Yeah. I love that. That's actually one of the questions I ask when I'm talking to, new founders and we're looking at investment. It's like, what is the point of view on your, like, what is this, whether it's an AI agent or software, what point of view does it have? Because I think we are going back to this idea of like tech with an opinion, like it's showing you the best way to do it. I think for a little while we went the over customized route, and even in like the outreach days, it was kind of like, no, you can do it whichever way you want, and we've got all these different ways. And I think having that strong point of view, and the last thing I say in that bridging that gap, when you have you give and you lead with expertise and thought leadership and a point of view. I think we've all been in scenarios where we have a friend who has maybe made health a priority over the last 3 months, or they just went to some retreat in Costa Rica and they came back and they're like glowing, and they don't really have to tell you a bunch of stuff. They'll give you a little bit and you naturally lean in and you're like, what happened? What are you doing? How are you getting these results in your personal life? In this case, business results. I'm very confident that when done well, like the question they ask is going to be them leaning in. They'll be curious to learn more.
Yeah.
On
how do I do this? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Totally. That's a great point.
By the way, on Zendesk, those early days when they had support managers in the sales pit. I remember Sib telling me about it. Jim Sib was the leader, and he was like, yeah, I think it was like 1 to 5. Like literally they just had these guys in there so you can get on and deliver peer-based expertise, while on a call, and that sort of falls, just sort of piggybacking the Zendesk example. I love, by the way, the point of view thing. It's so interesting now that I'm sort of in this world too. It's like when the founder can articulate that they built something for someone, it's just the go-to-market flow can be a lot easier than you built something and we're trying to figure out who it's for. And to build a point of view, you really need to figure out, especially now with AI, it's only a few, Anthropics and OpenAI. Everyone else, you've got to find your AI niche or your new whatever it is you're trying to do. Like who is this for? And and when you can understand that, you can build a real POV. What other things you mentioned on your overcomplicating comment, which was your first one? Pipeline. How are we overcomplicating pipeline generation? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So again, I'll try and speak through just my lived experience right now.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Is the staring down the barrel of a ridiculous, many tens of millions of dollars numbers, and also none of my, some people listening to this might be like, oh, well, it's easier for you to get connected with people because you have this like brand or whatever. So you can just like ping people. Well, all my network is like go-to-market operators, right? I had to go and build a brand new network, which was family offices, fund of funds, ultra high net worth individuals. I didn't have those folks. They were not in my network beyond a few that were, VCs from the outreach days and things. And so I tried it all. I tried cold outbound. We tried like every outbound pipeline gen trick known to mankind. And I've been around a lot. And what I learned was there was absolutely no shortcuts. And it ties into this trusted advisor piece. The only thing I could do, and it took a long time, is I would try and get in front of the people that I needed to get in front of and network with. And in a non-transactional, non-commercial environment. So first, I just needed them to know me, be like, hey, Scott kind of knows what he's talking about, and he's a pretty valuable node in my network. And so it was trying to find ways, and it's different for whatever product service you sell. But for me, it was setting up an initial call just to see how I could be valuable for them. And everyone wants good deal flow. We have good deal flow. Well, I can send you deal flow. I can send you other maybe LP introductions. If any of your portfolio companies are having go-to-market challenges, I can use our network. So that was my initial sort of pipeline, was just like getting my network to a place where I had at least a decent enough amount of people that kind of had baseline respect for me. And then I went and mapped out kind of our ICP, the people that I thought were the highest likelihood to invest in our fund. Started with a list of 150, went down, had some really honest conversations with ourselves, and be like, no, here's the 25 I'm going to focus on. Focus, I also think, is an absolute superpower. Quick side anecdote, when my reps were struggling back in the day and they had a week to hit their quota, this is when I was running the BDR function, I would take their account list from 200 down to 10. And that seems like, that's going to hurt them. It was mind blowing that within that week, if I shortened and just gave them 10, they would get opportunities in 4 of them because they cut out all the noise. And I said, your only job in this whole world is to try and get a meeting with these 10 people. Can you do it? All of a sudden, creativity explodes. They don't do the normal process. They're using their actual brains and they make it happen. So focus is a superpower. So, and then it was all a warm introduction game. And so I would go back to this initial network. And the key is doing the research, which is easier than ever with ChatGPT. We have all this tooling to go really, really deep on why I believe this person should talk to me. And then secondarily, this ask I'm about to make of this introduction, how can I make it a give for them versus an ask? Because I'm asking them to, give out some social capital on my behalf. How can I make it a give? Maybe that's inviting this person to a dinner that we're going to be having in their city. Maybe that's inviting them on the podcast that we have. Maybe it is, hey, I saw that they had a portfolio company. We have a similar one. They might be going through the same challenges. I would love to wrestle with them and see if I can help them. So making it a win for that person, giving the introduction. Again, this is a lot of work. You could spend like 4 hours doing all this research and figuring out your path of least resistance to this person, and then how you make that person feel like it's a give, not an ask. And then, those introductions happen, and that was like the only way it would work. And I think that is the way to do outbound, whether you're fundraising or you're just a BDR. And so it kind of comes down to 3 jobs. Your job is to increase your connectivity to your ICP. You can do that through content, you can do that communities, through events. Your job is to provide value to that network in any way you can. Thought leadership, being helpful outside of your role, data, benchmarks, whatever you can do, even if you're early in your career, you can find ways to be valuable. And then third is like finding win-win ways to turn that value into revenue and farm introductions. And your job is just to make sure your social capital bank account is always higher than your ask bank account. But if I was trying to create pipeline today, it would be all warm introductions. That's all I would do. Unfortunately, it's hard to scale. It's hard work. It is built on trust, and it's not beautifully repeatable and scalable as, sending 100, somewhat custom emails a day and doing some cold calls.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, listening to you talk about that, one thing I find interesting, and tell me if I'm thinking about this the right way. It seems like in the VC world, like the currency is really connections and the network and introductions, right? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't seem to be the case in the world of SaaS sales. I mean, is that a difference as you think about these two different worlds?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I guess the currency is access and network, I guess. And I guess my learning is the currency is both in both in SaaS and in VC. It's actually the currency of everything that we do. I think we just forgot that in SaaS because we have so much fancy tooling, and we were able to drive results without having to do that hard work. And now we're back to the hard work, and we're realizing, oh shit, I didn't do the work to have the access. I didn't do the work to have the point of view. I didn't do the work to network. That's always been the currency. Yeah. I think we were able to use technology to get away from that. And now everyone has technology, so no one has an advantage, and we're back to that currency being true again.
Yeah.
By the way, you guys, while you guys were calling, Sam sent me a text. I'm going to read it. It's amazing. Because Scott A will enjoy this. Are you playing with a bottle cap or something? The mics are picking that up. Does it sound like I'm... Huh?
Was it true? Was it true?
No, playing with a bottle cap?
Dude, that was like 20 minutes ago. Oh.
I don't think it makes noise. And that was me.
It was something on the desk.
Sam is guilty of profiling, albeit profiling accurately, I might add. But
you've got that's a gift. This is an actual bottle cap. Like, you should be in Hollywood, like making sounds or something. The ability to pick that up is wild.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to. I love. I have my associate Mark loves to send me text during calls, and I always read them to the person. It just drives him nuts. So like I was on a call and he wrote, "Who is this guy?" And I wrote, it was Neil Harrington, who I love to put on the spot. I go, "Neil, stop talking for a sec. I just want you to know Mark just sent me a text asking, who is this guy?" And he's like, "What? I met him." Anyway, sorry, that's a Rosenberg.
I'm so used to Craig like opening a packet of crackers or something. And the mic just picking all of that up.
I get hungry, I got to eat. So, hey, by the way, I wanted to get Albro. Do you mind? I was going to. Scott B was talking. One of the things I've learned from Albro that's been working recently. And I know it sounds like I'm doing a tactic. I just feel like it relates, which is building particularly with founders, right? Early stage, you're building your reputation on LinkedIn right now, and then DMing from LinkedIn from the founder. If you've built that reputation and that platform, leveraging that to reach out. So in many ways, that's like a credibility, trust building exercise that's happening for many on LinkedIn, and then being able to turn that. So it's not a network play, but it is a trusted advisor play. But Scott, that's a decent high level. Albro, that's a decent high level. Yeah.
Totally. I think the founder, everything that Barker has just described, if you think about it, the founder is the best person to go do that thing, state a point of view, tell a story, however you want to describe it, and then use that as a wedge to start networking into a community of people you care about, your ICP, however you want to describe that. The founder is like a secret weapon for an early stage startup when it comes to doing that. Scott's talking about something different though, which is, okay, how do you keep doing that
right
once you're starting to scale? And it's super, I actually did this little founder brand workshop for a company yesterday. They're absolutely killing it, doing really well. And they're having this problem because the founder was so good at that. And now they need to get the sales team to be good at it, but she's kind of reluctant to like give it up, right? Like, and they're not investing the appropriate resources in making sure that the sales team's empowered and enabled to go do it at the individual rep level. There are ideas on how to do that and best practices on how to do that. But yeah, the founder brand is a perfect example of what Scott's talking about, particularly in the early stages of a business.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out. It's almost like this way of selling is scaling founder-led sales. So this is how founders, what I'm describing is how founders sell. And
Perfect.
then we try and over-engineer and then turn everyone into the same scalable, repeatable thing that doesn't work very well. We know it doesn't work very well. So I think it's about like giving folks the autonomy. And this kind of goes to the kind of accountability piece. The second one is like, if I didn't have a case study and I needed a case study, I would call that, like, when people, there's a reason I'm an entrepreneur now and doing my own thing. People didn't always love it. But like, if I needed a case study, I would call the customer and get a case study and build it myself. If there are things that are stopping you from doing your job, it is nobody else's problem but your own. You have a number to hit. You should look at this as your own business, your number and your target accounts. That is your business. So what do you need to do? I bought all sorts of technology for myself early in my career because my company wouldn't buy it for me. Like all of these little things, and like spending a little bit of money here or there, or spending your weekends doing something. Like, it is about full accountability of doing whatever you need to do to own that piece of business. And I think when you start thinking like that, then you naturally are more like founder-led sales. And you are invested in, okay, the founder can do this. And that's because they know the story intimately well and they have the credibility. Why don't I spend the time to learn that story just as well? And it doesn't matter that it's not exactly your story. You can switch their story a little bit that ties you into it more. But
I think that's great. By the way, one thing to look at in an early stage company, whether you're an investor, a salesperson thinking about joining the company, is if the founder is not out there telling compelling stories and networking themselves, it is highly unlikely the average sales rep's going to be able to do it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is something that starts in the early days of a company. It's truly founder-led. Yeah, I can't think of an organization where, the sales team writ large, like, created the story from scratch, started networking the right way, et cetera, right? Without the founder having done it first.
Yeah, that's actually, you guys have created a new selling methodology, which is founder sales for reps. Because you guys, as you were talking, I'm just sitting there going, it's so interesting because, like, and Scott B., I'll take your experiences. The thing about the sales engagement market when it came out was that the reps could, like a founder, provide their personal story on why they joined, and it would work, right? Yeah. They'd say, I'm sitting there working at ... company, and I can't do that. And part of the founder thing is that story, as Scott said, you lead into the point of view with your own personal story there. The sales engagement group category, they had that built-in advantage, and it led to like a really great connection early on to the buyers, right?
Absolutely.
And you should, if you don't have that personal story, you shouldn't be at that company, right? You should have been inspired to join this company. And yeah, we had it. So I had it at the Sales Hacker days, and one of the greatest things I could say was, and this was true, early in my career, I kept getting promoted really quickly, and I had all these gaps in my knowledge. So I leaned on Sales Hacker to fill all these knowledge gaps, and it was an incredible, helpful resource for me. So when I joined to run revenue and partnerships, I would say that here's my personal story. It helped me get promoted here, and like I literally stood up this article and brought in this tech stack that I read from this person and this person, and it fucking worked. And you know, I could really believe it. And then same at Outreach was like, hey, you're on this call because we ran you through an outreach sequence, and 80% of our pipeline is built on outbound sequences sent by Outreach. Like, what an incredible story. And that doesn't have to come from the founder, but it's taking the time. Sales is the artist, like storytelling. So, you know, take the time to build your story, and I will sit down and rewrite my story on like a quarterly basis based on the things that I now have learned. And sometimes you can only connect the dots looking back and be like, oh, interesting. I learned that from there. And this is why I do this. And then I can tailor that to whatever I happen to be, you know, focused on solving. But I'll share this quote that I love, and I think we're getting back to simplicity in sales, and that's not to say it's not hard. It's actually harder to do simple things extremely well. But there's this quote. It's from a boxer, Vinny Pazienza, and it was made famous on a recent movie, In This Blood. And this reporter asks him a question, and and the question is, "What's the biggest lie you've ever been told?" And he goes, "It's not that simple." And the reporter goes, "Why not?" And he goes, "No, that's the biggest lie I was ever told, that it's not that simple. It's a lie. They'll tell you over and over and over again." And she goes like, "What's not that simple?" And he says, "Any of it, all of it. That's how they get you to give up. They say it's not that simple." And she goes, "So what's the truth?" And that it is, that if you just do the thing that they tell you can't do, then it's done, and you realize it's that simple, and then it always was. And I think like, we need to bring that back of like, it is simple, but it is really hard to build authentic relationships. It is really hard to become an expert, and you can have every tooling known to man, but if you can't figure out your story, figure out how to build trust, and earn the right to solve the problem, you're fucked. But I think we're going to automate everything and then get back to those core things that makes, you know, scaling companies and selling really fun.
Yeah. Uniquely, those are all what I would call like uniquely human skills, right? Like the ability to tell a good original story, the ability to establish trust, the ability to earn the right to ask for something. These are really human things. They're going to be, ironically, more important than ever in the world of AI. And, you know, someone was asking me about like, hey, what happens to Gartner Group or a Gartner analyst in the world of AI? I was like, they're going to be more important than ever, right? Because people are going to want to hear from like real, authentic humans who have deep expertise on the subject. We can argue about how deep the expertise is and that type of stuff, but Gartner analysts are going to be more valuable than ever.
Yeah, AI is not here to give you a contrarian point of view. It's to tell you the aggregate of all the data that's out there that's going to be the opposite of contrarian. It is going to be the agreed upon thesis. So if you can look at a problem, solution, service, technology, and connect the dots in a way that's maybe contrarian to what others are thinking, like AI can't do that, won't do it for a very long time.
Yep.
All right. Well, there we go. We had a mic drop quote and then a finale on uniquely human. So that's what I like to see. And it's really awesome that Scott B was the bottle cap culprit and not me. It makes me feel good, man. Because I mean, I do things.
I fidget from time to time. It's not a good habit.
It's amazing. But anyway, so two, as we come off. So one, that was a great excellent. And I'm so glad I got Albro's first guest co-host session out of the way. Sam, he did a good job.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I said I would. I actually made a personal commitment to myself a year ago that I would never do a podcast. Now I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I'm actually a co-host of a podcast. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to regret this.
Yeah, no, I love it. And then Barker, thank you for coming on. Just so everyone knows, your podcast is amazing.
Thanks, man.
It's really actionable, and the stories that come out of it are great. And
Yep.
That's why you're continuing to pick up the pulse of the market. So it was great to have you on. I'm just really glad we were able to make it work, man. And thank you for coming on the transaction.
Thank you. That was a ton of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
All right.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Transaction. Craig and I really appreciate the fact that you've listened all the way to the end. What are you actually doing here? For show notes and other episodes, please visit us at thetransactionpod.com. Like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other place you get your podcast from. Either you have walked away from your podcast device, or this is playing somewhere in the background. Someone in your house would really like for you to shut this off now.